Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Vought, for being here. One of the things that I want to talk to you about first is the U.S. African Development Foundation, USADF. During the DOGE process and through other inquiries, it's been revealed that there's been a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse within USADF, so much so that a couple of months ago, the same week, we were called upon to pass a $5 bill appropriations package that included staggering $12 million for USADF. The acting director of USADF declared it hopelessly mired in corruption and suggested that it should be defunded. I offered an amendment to try to strip the funding, and that regrettably was tabled. But I want to talk to you about this. Do you agree that we ought to rescind funding from USADF?
I think we should defund that particular agency, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, with regard to the state and local fiscal recovery funds, the SLFRF, when Democrats passed the American Rescue Plan Act, which could have been called the COVID exploitation bill, there was a lot of money going on around a $350 billion program that allowed states and localities to recklessly spend federal dollars. Very often, that's where we see a lot of abuse, is if you have one government providing a large sum of funding, either through a block grant, an entitlement program, or otherwise, and then a state government in charge of administering it. Sometimes the deficits in the accountability chain there make it very difficult to detect and stop waste, fraud, and abuse. Just tell me a little bit about what you and OMB are doing within the administration to help ensure compliance with the expenditure deadline at the end of this year for the funds that have been obligated from the state and local fiscal recovery fund.
I'm not aware of that particular fund, but it might be called a different name. I'm happy to check up on it.
Okay. Now, President Trump last month established something called the Task Force to Eliminate Fraud. Very worthy objective, and there's certainly plenty of fraud to go around. I tend to think when we see these instances of fraud that have gotten a lot of public attention in Minnesota, in California, I tend to think of the ones that we're aware of as the tip of a very large iceberg. Because again, this is the sort of thing that happens when you've got one government providing the funding and other governments doing the spending. There isn't the same type of accountability that is going on if their own states and localities were providing that same funding. Given OMB's position on this task force and the unique insights that you at OMB have in federal program accounts, how do you and your team at OMB plan to help carry out the responsibilities in the task force in conjunction with the rest of the administration?
Well, our role there is to be part of the government-wide efforts there. We want to make sure that agencies that need resources to be able to get investigators, if there are bureaucratic barriers to fighting fraud, we want to be there to help remove those. I mean, you raise a great point with regard to states and the extent to which often we're asking for roles that we can then run them through various systems to make sure someone who they say they are, and they fight us on that. They don't give us those roles.
They meaning the states.
The states fight us on that. And so that's the kind of thing that we may actually have to come to you and ask for additional tools to be able to say, look, we're going to withhold funding here until you give us the roles that we need to have assurance that someone is not getting child care funding if they are not in fact serving or having a child in child care. So these are a host of things we plan to tackle. We want to prosecute, have the Department of Justice prosecute everything they possibly can. We want to remove barriers to fighting fraud and finding it, and then we want to make sure it can never happen again so that we get down to as close to zero as the senator from Ohio pointed us to.
Sure, sure. Getting as close to zero is always a good thing, and it's a great aspiration. One has to wonder, particularly if in some programs you lack the tools, if you legally lack the ability under existing law with any of these programs to say, if you don't respond to our reasonable request for information, we're going to withhold funds. If you don't have that, we need to do that. More broadly, is it tenable Or are we just going to continue seeing more waste, fraud, and abuse as long as we continue funding as many things as we do, to the tune of however many hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars it is in a particular year? Is it tenable to root out waste, fraud, and abuse where the government spending the money is not the same government that is providing the money?
It's not tenable to have the size and scope of the federal government and not going to have a continued conversation about fraud, right? So when you see us eliminate programs that we don't think should exist, it's in part and parcel because we think that it's an incredibly fraudulent program that should go away. And part of what informs that is the extent to which the federal government's always going to have a hard time going that granular to see where the funds flow are. And it's particularly going to be hard when we can't trust many states to give us the information we need to come alongside them and help fight fraud.
Thank you, sir.
Support journalism you trust. Support PBS News. Donate now, or even better, start a monthly contribution today.